Turning 30 doesn't steal your youth. It steals your excuses. For years, you've been telling yourself the same story. I'll start when I have more money. I'll leave when the timing is right. I'll become the person I'm meant to be. Eventually. And in your 20s, that story feels believable. Time seems infinite. Every important decision feels like it can wait another year. The life you truly want always appears to be just around the corner. Then something changes. Not because the calendar suddenly matters, but because the future you've been postponing quietly becomes your present. The job you were only supposed to keep for a while becomes your career. The habits you thought were temporary become your lifestyle. The compromises you made, just for now, slowly harden into your identity. One day, you look around and realize you're no longer building a life. You're maintaining one. Seneca warned about this nearly 2,000 years ago. He argued that people do not suffer because life is short, but because they spend most of it wasting what they already have, believing there will always be more later. Carl Jung saw another danger hidden beneath that idea. He believed that by the middle of adulthood, the personality you've spent years constructing to earn approval, security, and recognition can become so convincing that even you begin to mistake it for your true self. The mask that once helped you survive slowly becomes the prison that keeps you from living. Jung describes the second half of life as the period in which a person is called to move beyond social adaptation and toward individuation, the difficult process of becoming who they genuinely are. That quiet restlessness you've been carrying, the feeling that something is missing, even though everything looks fine from the outside. The suspicion that you've been living a version of your life instead of your life. None of that is a sign of immaturity. It may be the healthiest part of your mind refusing to let you disappear behind the role you've been playing. Because your 30s are different. This is the decade when wasted years stop feeling invisible. Every choice you postpone becomes more expensive. Every year you tolerate a life that isn't truly yours makes that life harder to escape. So before another year quietly slips into the next, let's explore what Seneca understood about wasted time, what Carl Jung discovered about the false self, and why your 30s may be the last moment when changing your life is difficult, but still far easier than regretting the one you never had. You've built something real. Not what you imagined at 20. Not the version of life that used to feel inevitable when you looked forward from there. But something real. Work that pays reliably. A routine that holds. Relationships built over years. A version of yourself that other people find legible and stable. You've done what you were supposed to do, and the reward for doing it well is precisely what makes this decade dangerous. A life comfortable enough to never quite force you to question it, and hollow enough that the question keeps surfacing anyway. Seneca watched powerful men do exactly this. Senators who would accumulate every privilege Rome could offer, and then spend the rest of their careers longing for something they couldn't name. He watched them perpetually postpone the life they actually wanted while living the life they had agreed to. The greatest obstacle to living, he wrote, is expectation, which hangs upon tomorrow and loses today. He wasn't diagnosing laziness. He was diagnosing the particular paralysis that arrives once a person has enough. Enough to stop feeling desperate. Not enough to feel genuinely alive. The trap of your 30s is not that life is hard. Hard would force a confrontation. The trap is that it's manageable. Manageable allows you to keep going indefinitely. Another month, another quarter, another year. The real version of your life stays perpetually one milestone away. And here is what Seneca understood that most people in this position don't. The time you are spending in this holding pattern is not neutral time. It's your life. It's the material you have. And you are spending it waiting. Look at the actual texture of your weeks. Not the extraordinary ones. The ordinary ones. Where does your attention go? To the things you chose, or to the things that claimed you? Seneca asked this with more specificity than most people are comfortable with. Count the days given to a creditor, a client, an obligation you never consciously adopted. Count the hours given to distraction, to recovery from distraction, to preparing for tasks that require none of your actual depth. What remains? He already knew the answer. Very little. Reckon up the days of your life. You will find that very few, and those the refuse, have been left for you. The confrontation this demands is not dramatic. It's a single honest accounting, done this week, of where your attention is actually going versus where you know it should go. Not where you wish it could go someday, where it should go now, given what you already know about yourself. Jung would enter this conversation here and say the discomfort you feel about that accounting is itself the signal. In the next part, we go directly to what he meant. If this content is making sense to you, click the subscribe button and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for your support. Picture the exact moment you stopped being surprised by your own life. It happened gradually and without announcement. There was no morning you woke up and decided to trade your genuine reactions for reliable ones, your own instincts for the ones your environment rewarded. But at some point, the adjustment became automatic. You learned what got approval and what didn't, what was safe to say in a meeting and what wasn't, what version of yourself made relationships run smoothly, and what version created friction. You adapted. And adaptation, done well enough, stops feeling like adaptation and starts feeling like identity. Jung called this structure the persona. In analytical psychology, the word means mask, the face we construct to negotiate with the social world, assembled from whatever our environment consistently rewarded and whatever it consistently punished. And Jung was careful to say, this is not pathology, it is necessary. You cannot move through the world without one. The problem arrives at a specific and predictable point, when the mask has been worn long enough that you can no longer feel the difference between it and the face underneath. By your 30s, this is typically where you are. The persona has set. You have been performing the competent professional, the reliable partner, the person your family expects, the version of yourself that other people find easy to predict, long enough that these roles no longer feel like roles. They feel like facts about you. And this is where Jung becomes genuinely disturbing. He argued that the more energy you invest in the persona, the more pressure builds from what he called the self, the actual core of who you are, which has not disappeared while you were busy constructing the mask. It has been accumulating. The pressure surfaces as what you've probably been calling restlessness or dissatisfaction, or a vague sense that something is missing that you can't justify given everything that's objectively fine. Jung was precise about this. Since the aims of the second half of life are different from those of the first, to linger too long in the youthful attitude produces a division of the will. Consciousness still presses forward, but the unconscious lags behind, because the strength and inner resolve needed for further expansion have been sapped. This disunity with oneself begets discontent. That discontent is a message. The question is whether you will treat it as noise to be managed or information to be read. Here is something concrete you can do before this video ends. Think of one role you play consistently, one that you perform well and that people have come to depend on, and ask yourself honestly, did you choose this, or did you become it because it was easier than the alternative? Not whether it's bad, not whether you should abandon it, just whether the choice was actually yours. The discomfort that question produces is precisely proportional to how long it's been avoided. What makes the persona dangerous in this decade specifically is not that it exists, it's that it begins to mistake itself for the whole person. Jung watched this process across hundreds of patients and named what it produces in the next phase of life. A growing suspicion that your own biography is somehow foreign to you. You built it. You don't recognize it as yours. The next part is about what Seneca and Jung both identified as the specific behaviors that make this worse and what interrupts them. Seneca was not interested in abstract warnings. He pointed at specific lives. He described the lawyers who are always about to retire, the officials who are always about to rest, the men who tell themselves that after the next milestone, after the children are grown, after the right moment arrives, they will finally begin. He described them with a kind of cold precision. They are postponing to the 50th year their retirement into leisure, and to the 60th, the release from all obligations. And what guarantee do you have that your life will last longer? He wrote this in the 1st century AD. The specific roles have changed. The mechanism hasn't. The people this describes are not failures. That would make them easier to learn from. They are the people 10 years ahead of you on the trajectory you're currently on, the ones who never changed course, who stayed competent and functional and mildly dissatisfied until the dissatisfaction stopped registering as a problem and became just the ambient condition of their existence. Their restlessness settled into complaint. Their unanswered questions hardened into the particular cynicism that comes from a person who once had real questions and stopped asking them. Jung observed the same pattern from inside the psyche and named what produces it. The choice, made countless times without ever quite being made consciously, to stay in the persona rather than tolerate the discomfort of questioning it. He was blunt about what this costs. The vast majority of mankind do not choose their own way, but convention, and consequently develop not themselves, but a method and a collective mode of life at the cost of their own wholeness. Not their happiness, their wholeness, the sense of being fully inhabited by your own life. Now here is where this stops being observation and becomes demand. Seneca asked his reader to perform a specific act of accounting, not as a philosophical exercise, as a practical diagnostic. Take the last month. Write down, as honestly as you can, where the time actually went, not where you meant for it to go, where it went. Then identify in that list what you chose and what claimed you. How much of the month was spent on things you would choose again if you could see the cost clearly? How much was spent maintaining obligations you took on without fully deciding to? Habits that filled time but left nothing, obligations to other people's visions of who you should be. The result of this accounting is not guilt. Seneca was not interested in guilt. He was interested in decision. The people he described, the ones perpetually about to begin, never performed this accounting. That's how they kept going. The honest accounting makes it impossible to keep going on the same terms, because it makes the cost visible. And once the cost is visible, you have to decide, actually decide, not defer, whether what you're spending your time on is worth it. The decision is not one dramatic change. It's a reorientation of attention, starting this week, toward the thing you already know you should be building. One concrete step, not a plan, a step. Seneca's instruction on this was specific. Live immediately, not eventually, not after conditions improve. Now, in the life you actually have, with the time that's actually available. The question is what that step is, and that requires going into the part of this that Jung understood better than anyone. If what you're hearing resonates with you, you'll find real value in my ebooks. Beyond the Shadow breaks down Jung's core ideas, while Dialogues with the Unconscious gives you a 30-day path to apply them in your life. Both are linked in the pinned comment. You already know what it is, not in the abstract, concretely. There is a specific thing you keep almost starting, a specific direction you keep almost turning toward, a specific question about your own life that you have become very skilled at deferring. You don't defer it because you've decided it's not important. You defer it because you have learned, through years of practice, exactly how much attention you can give it without having to do anything about it. You know how to feel it, acknowledge it quietly, and return to what's already in front of you. You've made this move so many times, it no longer registers as a move. Jung named what you're avoiding. In The Development of Personality, he wrote about the inner voice. Anyone with a vocation hears the voice of the inner man. He is called. The word vocation comes from the Latin for being addressed, for hearing your name called. Not by external authority, by something inside you that knows, with more certainty than your cautious reasoning mind would like, what you're supposed to be doing and what you're not. Jung observed that this voice tends to arrive precisely through discomfort, precisely at the places you have most carefully protected, precisely in the form of the restlessness you've been interpreting as mood. He was also clear about what happens when it's ignored long enough. It doesn't go away. It intensifies. Behind the neurotic perversion is concealed his vocation, his destiny, the growth of personality, the full realization of the life will that is born with the individual. It is the man without amor fati who is the neurotic. The person who cannot say yes to the life that is actually his, who manages the voice instead of answering it. Seneca approached the same territory from a different angle. He was not interested in why people ignored their instincts. He was interested in what they do instead. He described, with forensic detail, the way a person fills time with everything except the thing that matters, with obligations that feel important, with busyness that feels like productivity, with the management of other people's expectations that feels like responsibility. He who has time for philosophy is occupied with a truly human activity, he wrote, meaning by philosophy not an academic discipline, but the deliberate examination of your own life. The people who never do this, he wrote, have given their lives over to others and have very little left. Here is the practical edge of this. The thing you keep almost starting. The direction you keep almost moving. Stop treating it as a future self problem. Your future self will have the same pressures, the same resistance, the same talent for deferral, and less time. The voice you're managing does not quiet with distance. It grows more insistent and more expensive to override. Do one thing today, not this week, today, that moves in the direction of the thing you've been deferring, not the whole project. One action. Something that takes less than an hour and that you cannot rationalize away as premature. Jung called this beginning the absolute affirmation of all that constitutes the individual. Seneca called it living immediately. They were describing the same act, the decision to stop treating your own life as something you will get to eventually. This is the part neither thinker made soft. Jung was direct about what it actually costs to choose your own way. To develop one's own personality is an unpopular undertaking, a deviation that is highly uncongenial to the herd. He was not talking about social disapproval in the abstract. He was precise. When you begin to move toward the person you actually are rather than the person you've been performing, you lose things. Relationships that were built on the performance. Approval from people who depended on your predictability. The particular comfort of never having to fully decide who you are. These are real losses. Jung did not minimize them. What he argued, with the evidence of hundreds of clinical cases, is that the alternative costs more. Not all at once. Gradually, in ways that are easier to absorb, but harder to recover from. He described the process. The development of personality is a favor that must be paid for dearly. But the people who talk most loudly about developing their personalities are the very ones who are least mindful of the results, which are such as to frighten away all weaker spirits. The cost of not developing it is the slow contraction of the life available to you, the options that narrow, the sense of authorship over your own existence that diminishes year by year until you are not living a life so much as maintaining one. Seneca's accounting of this cost was different in texture but identical in conclusion. He described what it looks like at the end. The person who arrives at old age with the sudden realization that they spent an enormous amount of time, and almost none of it was theirs, not stolen by enemies, given away voluntarily. You have been giving it to one person after another, he wrote. Count up the days of your life. You will find that very few, and those the refuse, have been left for you. The refuse. The leftover hours after everyone else got what they needed from you. Now here is where both arguments converge on something concrete. The choice you are making right now, in this decade, is not between safety and risk. It is between two different kinds of cost. One cost is immediate and visible, the discomfort of changing direction, the disruption of existing arrangements, the loss of the approval you have been earning. The other cost is deferred and invisible, the gradual erasure of the life you might have built, paid in increments small enough to absorb, but large enough to add up to something irreversible. The practical version of this is a single comparison. Take the thing you've been deferring and estimate what it would actually require to begin. Not to complete it, not to guarantee it succeeds, just to begin. How many hours per week? What existing obligation would need to be reduced or ended to create that space? What approval would you risk losing? Write these down, then look at the other side. What does another year of deferral cost? Not dramatically. What specifically will be different about your relationship to this thing in a year if you defer it again? This comparison does not produce inspiration. It produces clarity. And clarity, in this context, is more useful than inspiration because it removes the illusion that the decision is not yet made. The decision is being made continuously, every day, by what you do and don't do with your time. The question is whether you are making it consciously. Jung's final word on this was characteristically demanding. Personality can never develop unless the individual chooses his own way, consciously and with moral deliberation. Not with perfect information, not when conditions are right, consciously, now, with what you already know. Neither of them would offer you a framework. Seneca would look at your life as it actually is this week, not as you intend it to be, and ask one question. What part of it belongs to you? Not symbolically, concretely. Which hours are spent in accordance with what you know your time is worth, and which are spent in the service of inertia, obligation, or the management of other people's expectations of you? His instruction was not to optimize the second category. It was to shrink it, deliberately and immediately, in favor of the first. Jung would ask something different, but adjacent. When you imagine the person you were supposed to become, the version of yourself that the restlessness is pointing toward, what specifically does that person do with their time that you currently don't? Not their circumstances, not their freedom from your current constraints. What do they actually do? Jung believed you already know this. The answer is not hidden from you. It is being deferred by you. And the deferral, held long enough, becomes indistinguishable from a decision. Together, these two arguments close around a single point. The life you are waiting to begin is being purchased with the life you are currently living. Every year you spend in the holding pattern is a year you cannot recover. Seneca was blunt about the arithmetic. The time you give away, to obligation, to distraction, to the perpetual postponement of what you actually know matters, does not come back. And Jung was equally blunt about what happens to the self you keep setting aside. It does not wait patiently. It accumulates pressure. It makes itself felt through exactly the dissatisfaction, the restlessness, the hollow sense of going through motions that you have been experiencing and interpreting as a problem with your circumstances rather than a message from your own nature. The action both thinkers would point you toward is not a grand gesture. Seneca's version is immediate and specific. This week, Reclaim 1 hour per day that currently belongs to something other than what you know matters. Not for rest, for the thing, the project, the direction, the work that your better judgment has been telling you belongs at the center of your life. Jung's version is about honesty. Look at the role you have been performing most consistently, the one that earns the most approval, and ask whether it is the full truth of who you are or the version of you that the world found easiest to work with. Both questions will be uncomfortable. That discomfort is the point. Only in this sense, Jung wrote, is he entitled to speak of his vocation, his law. Not someone else's idea of what he should do, not the role he performed well enough that it became permanent, the actual law of his own being, which has been pressing for acknowledgement this whole time. If something in this video named what you've been deferring, type "I start now" in the comments, not as a performance, as a record of the moment you stop treating it as a future self problem. If this landed the way it should, the video on your screen right now will too. Click to keep watching.